We'll have to do it. Can't you just do this? Good afternoon, dear students and parents and teachers and whoever is watching us online. The day has finally arrived, the day that the Class 11s have been working towards for 9 months, And in actual fact, many of the students have been preparing for this day long before the beginning of the year. The Class 11 project is the culmination of our Waldorf curriculum. The project challenges the students to research and involve themselves in a substantial task. The completion of this project marks the end of their Waldorf education. The students of previous years will tell you that this was not an easy process. You need dedication, commitment, and sustained hard work. However, this year, the students will tell you another story, that COVID-19 added to the stress. They will tell you how it added to their workload and how it required them to go beyond in commitment. Most of the students had to contend with a change of plan, particularly with regards to their practical component. It also required a great deal of self-discipline to continue, as there were no mentors and a guardian nagging them face to face. In the months of lockdown and online schooling, I could hear the uncertainty and sometimes panic in my class. Despite the odds, though, they continued diligently with their projects and did all that they could to get their practicals done. Once we came back, we had to reset all our dates, and then the pressure was really on. The students had to complete their books, the making of their books. They had to meet with their mentors, write up their practicals, start writing in their book, and of course, prepare for the speech today. It was pressured, to say the least. I want to sincerely congratulate each and every one of the students. You have really, really done amazing stuff. And the way you have set your mind to it has made me very proud. Parents, I hope you enjoy the speeches, but before we start, could everybody please turn off their cell phones? We have a change to the program. Tian Bester is going to go first, and Heather Mitchell-Moore will go last. So without much ado, I welcome Tian.
So I'll be starting with the performance. Tai Chi does not mean Oriental wisdom or something exotic. It is the wisdom of your own senses, mind and body together as one, unknown. Good afternoon, parents, teachers, and people joining us online. My name is Tian Bester, and for my grade 11 project, I decided to do Tai Chi. For my project, I decided to be introspective and do something that I would utilize for the rest of my life. So for those of you that are wondering what Tai Chi is, it's a bit like the movies where you see those people with the strange robes that look all peaceful and wise, that perform strange slow movements. By definition, Tai Chi is a Chinese martial art and a system of calisthenics consisting of sequences of slow and controlled movements. Tai Chi is a meditative martial art that brings relaxation and helps find the practitioner inner calm and peace by using body movements and gestures. Tai Chi was nothing like I had expected it to be. Commencing the project, I had expected it to be very challenging physically, and I was almost certain that I would get home after my sessions and just feel like sleeping. Although the opposite happened. After every session, I was awakened, and I felt like I was ready to take on the world. Tai Chi is one of the oldest martial arts in the world, having been around for more than 4,000 years. This is a good indication of how relevant and comprehensive the martial art is. Tai Chi isn't just about the physical training, like other martial arts. For example, Kung Fu is focused mainly on the physical training, but Tai Chi is more about spiritual training. Now, I don't mean spiritual in the sense of going to a church or a mosque and praying. I mean spiritual in the sense of being present in each moment, learning how to harness your emotions, and making sense of our busy lives. Tai Chi was born in China at the foot of the mountain Mitsong. This is home to the Shaolin Monastery, which is a Buddhist temple where Tai Chi, Kung Fu, and many other martial arts can be practiced. Tai Chi has had an interesting history, with the martial art having been the very essence of Chinese culture to being completely banned. When the Sui dynasty ended in about 618 AD, a warlord by the name of Wang Shishong took over the Shaolin monasteries without compensation to the people. The warlord had intentions of conquering China and making it a country ruled by militants and violence, this being the exact opposite philosophy of Tai Chi. In those days, Tai Chi had a very Buddhist approach to life. One aspect of Tai Chi were the 5 commandments of the Zen Buddhists, which are no killing, no theft, no pride, no drinking of wine, and no eating meat. The new emperor had no respect for the Buddhists and forced them to disobey the morals they lived by. This is when Tai Chi became a peaceful and meditative martial art. The people that did Tai Chi had to adapt, and in doing so, they hid the attacking and defensive movements in slow and structured movements. The strikes and punches looked as though you might have been picking something up off the ground or harnessing energy. And the slow breathing became second nature to the people. Throughout the history of Tai Chi and the Shaolin Temple, emperors have either fully supported them or in other cases completely stood against them. With the very mixed emotions toward the martial art, the temples have been destroyed and rebuilt a few times. And with the destruction of the temples, a lot of the history has been lost. So the history that we have today of Tai Chi is written through a game we have all played. The game I am referring to is the broken telephone. I'm sure you can imagine what arguments this might have caused between the monks when rewriting history. Another misunderstanding of Tai Chi is that it is not a religion. They follow an ethos. I'm sure you're all wondering what an ethos is. An ethos is a Greek word meaning character that is used to describe the guiding beliefs, ideals that characterize a community, nation, or an ideology. Tai Chi follows a Taoist approach to life. The Taoist ethos is a Chinese form of spiritualism and is based around a lot of meditation and living in harmony with nature. The forms in Tai Chi are often enough studies done by monks of how animals move. There is an ancient legend which the monks tell of a boy who was always getting hurt and being thrown around by his brothers. So the boy decided to study animals and see how they fend for themselves. He then took what they did and transformed it into movements he could use to defend himself. This is basically how Tai Chi came to life. The boy studied animals such as the mantis, crane, and viper. He learned that the mantis was good at defending itself when studying how it moved. He also saw that the viper could strike really quickly, and then used what the viper did to strike his opponents. The boy decided to go home and see if he could defend himself from his brothers. Can you guess what happened next? He was still beat by his brothers, because they were still a lot stronger than him. But they realized that what the boy had learned was very valuable, and asked them to teach it to him. In Tai Chi, there are 48 different forms that you can learn. Some of them use weapons, and others just utilize the body. Each form has reference to an animal, and each has a defensive and striking approach to it. When you learn the form, you start to make sense of what is used to strike and what is used to defend. I focused on one form during my project. This was the 24 form. This was the first form ever taught to non-Chinese people outside of China. In Tai Chi, the forms we learn are complex and often enough so structured that the form I was learning can take up to 2 years of training before you have a comprehensive understanding of it. If you are wondering what a class comprises of, let me paint a picture for you. We walk into the class, and at the foot of the door, there is a log that we step over. The log is put there to stop the evil spirits from entering the class. The ancient monks believed that the evil spirits live low on the ground, hence the log that we step over, so that they cannot enter the space. Once we've greeted everyone, we start with gentle warm-ups, and then go into a light meditation for 40 minutes. The objective of the meditation is to let go of the day and our stresses, and really just to be present in the moment and allow our breath to take control. Once we've meditated, we practice the form for the remaining 10 minutes. The meditation has taught me how to stay focused and keep myself present. Going into the first class, it was all a bit overwhelming. I had expected to see people my age in the class, but I was completely wrong. The youngest student there, besides me, was in her mid-30s. I was surrounded by older people, which too was beneficial, because I was surrounded by maturity, which I had lacked before the project. We then started a class, and they lit the incense and hit the gong. You know those big round brass things in the Jackie Chan movies that they hit with a stick? And it makes a loud noise? One of those. Then we started doing Tai Chi. It started off quite strangely with the exercises to loosen the spine. We loosen the spine because in the Taoist ethos, they believe that a healthy spine is key to a healthy body. Then I had my first meditation session. Now this was a shock to the system. During my first meditation, I remember that I fell asleep, and Sifu had to come wake me up. I was a little embarrassed. Just imagine a 16-year-old boy falling asleep in front of all these older people. In this project, I wanted to do something completely out of the ordinary and challenge the perception people have on me. And I wanted to try find myself through practicing Tai Chi. This art form has helped me center myself, and I was able to find inner calm and peace from the pressures of daily life. I realized that after basketball training sessions, it helped me to align my physical body, and the introductory exercises helped me to loosen my stiff muscles. Most of all, it has grounded me and has helped me to focus on a task at hand. It has been a wonderful experience to be able to be in the moment where your mind is clear and to feel this in another space, not just when I'm on the basketball court. Not thinking about anything but the movements I am doing has helped me develop physical strength and movement. Thus, I have managed to achieve my goal despite the fact that lockdown has usually reduced the hours in which I was able to attend class. Tai Chi has helped me on the court and off the court. And I am thankful to the school for presenting me with this opportunity and giving me a space in which I can grow. I want to thank my internal mentor, Ms. Foster, for all her efforts in helping me. I want to thank my dad for keeping me motivated, taking me to Tai Chi, and helping me with my written project. I also want to thank Dubs for keeping me motivated and supporting me throughout the project. And last but not least, I want to thank Sifu for sharing her knowledge with me and teaching me all I have learned. Sheshe. The next speaker is Isabella Ludwig.
Train with the energy of a warrior, and soon you'll have the heart of one. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Isabella Ludwig, and for my grade 11 project, I chose mixed martial arts, sometimes referred to as cage fighting. Mixed martial arts is a full contact combat sport based on striking, grappling, and ground fighting. It is made up from various combat sports and martial arts from around the world. Mixed martial arts is believed to date back to the ancient Olympic Games in 648 BCE, where the Greek-Roman armies trained in pancration, a discipline that combines boxing and wrestling. In 393 CE, the Roman emperor banned pancration as a popular sport. However, this style of fighting later resurfaced in the 20th century in Brazil through a combat sport known as vale tudo, which means anything goes. It was popularized by the Gracie brothers, who made a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school in America. The Brazilian jiu-jitsu competitions later got noticed and were changed into Ultimate Fighting Championships, UFC. Mixed martial arts is a culmination of many different disciplines. Most traditional martial arts have a specific focus in areas such as stand-up, clinch, and ground. In stand-up, you have boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, karate, taekwondo, capoeira, combat sambal, and savante, which is trained to improve stand-up fighting. In clinch, you have judo, catch wrestling, freestyle wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling, luto livre, sambo, wushu sanshu, which is trained to improve clinching and takedowns. In ground, you have Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, sambo, catch wrestling, luto livre, which is trained to improve ground control and position, as well as to achieve submission holds and defend against them. I wanted to learn the basics of each because due to there not being any restrictions between switching from striking and grappling, the sport requires multiple skill sets, usually derived from different martial arts. This combined with the fact that MMA requires an athlete to be highly conditioned, both from an endurance and strength and power standpoint, made me sure to want to understand each aspect. Cardiovascular endurance is extremely important for MMA fighters. Though strength training is also important, your cardiovascular endurance is what keeps your body going through a match, which consists of 5 rounds and 5 minutes each. I began my cardio training, which I split up into 3 sections: interval training, running, and whole body cardio. Interval training can be a good stimulatory for time spent in the ring. An MMA fighter won't be active during the entire 5 minutes of a match. Instead, fighting takes place in quick bursts. High-intensity interval is effective and used by many high-level athletes. Long-distance running isn't for everyone, but is a great way to build cardiovascular endurance. Some MMA fighters add running into their daily routines and workout schedules. Cardio that involves the entire body can also double as strength training. Jump squats combined with upper body movements like push-ups. Using your entire body is another great way to stimulate what you might do in an MMA match. I started my practical with completing the cardiovascular trainings. First, to increase my fitness level. I struggled the most with long-distance running because it was completely different fitness to the style I was used to in football. After the first week of getting used to the cardio training, and I felt my fitness level was ready, I added in strength training. I then moved to techniques utilized in a mixed martial arts competition, which generally fall into 2 categories: striking techniques, such as kicks, knees, punches, and elbows, and grappling techniques, such as clinch holds, pinning holds, submission holds, sweeps, takedowns, and throws. Some of the famous strategies used by MMA fighters are as follows: sprawl and brawl. This is a stand-up strategy used mostly to defend against takedowns. This technique is mostly used by boxers, kickboxers, and karate fighters to avoid takedowns and to keep standing. Ground and pound. In this strategy, the opponent is taken to the ground with a takedown or a throw, and the fighter gets on top with a grappling position, strikes the opponent with a fist, elbow, and hammer fist. This strategy is mostly used before performing a submission hold. And clinch fighting. In this technique, the fighter uses a clinch hold to prevent the opponent from getting distant enough outside the striking range, while at the same time, the fighter keeps striking by knee strikes, punches, elbow strikes, stomps, and attempts to take down the opponent. This technique is mostly used by wrestlers and judo fighters in MMA matches. Mixed martial arts is a wonderful sport, filled with patience, dedication, and hard work. I thoroughly enjoyed this project and all the work that went into it. Learning about the history of each discipline and the distance mixed martial arts has traveled in order to be where it is today was extremely eye-opening for me and helped me to understand the sport more and have even more respect for the people who choose to make MMA their living. I was faced with the challenge of COVID-19 during this project, which impacted my practical, but I still managed to make the most of the YouTube videos and short training that I had. This was an amazing opportunity to learn about something I'm passionate about, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have done it. I've taken a lot out of this project, mentally and physically, which have taught me good life skills. I learned that MMA is a lot more than a sport. It's a culmination of different skills and techniques used in a fight. It is hard work, talent, and requires not only physical strength, but mental strength. Completing this practical required me to do a lot more understanding of the sport and required a lot of physical strength. I'm happy to have chosen this as my grade 11 project, although I do wish I was able to have done more physical training than what I did. But regardless, I learned a lot and have a newfound respect for the sport. The grade 11 project is not only an opportunity to focus on something you are interested in, but an opportunity to learn how to time manage, meet deadlines, and how not to plagiarize. I thank the school, my mentor, Mr. Hoff, my guardian, Ms. Futter, for pushing me in this project and making sure I succeed. Thank you for listening. Next up is Luca Zelios.
Safety is not an intellectual exercise to keep us in work. It is a matter of life and death. It is a sum of our contributions to safety management that determines whether the people we work with live or die. Good afternoon. For my Class 11 project, I chose to do first aid because it is something that I've always admired and something I've always wanted to learn about. First aid is also very handy to learn because you never know when someone could get badly hurt and you would need to use it and maybe even save a life. First aid is very complicated and so is its history. Through the years, as the way people lived and evolved and changed, so did first aid change and evolved as well. First aid dates all the way back to prehistoric man. Although there is little information available, there must have been situations that involved the need to use first aid. For example, stopping bleeding, stabilizing broken bones, and determining whether a plant was poisonous or not. From ancient hieroglyphics, we know that Egyptians used bandages in the mummification process, but they also used them to dress battle wounds. Ancient Egypt had become so experienced in their medical practices that even surrounding countries sent their young men to Egypt so that can carry out first aid. Over the years, first aid became more necessary, especially because of the many battles and wars that were being fought. Men were injured in battles, and because of the lack of medical attention, this usually resulted in massive numbers of soldiers dying. In 1099, religious knights trained in medical care to specifically treat battlefield injuries. In other words, although these knights were not doctors, they were formally trained to provide first aid. This can also be seen in classical Greek pottery, where there are pictures of men bandaging battle wounds. This dates all the way back to 500 BC. There are also many references to first aid being performed in the Roman army. Some Roman soldiers had the role of the Caspri. This means that they were responsible to help injured soldiers using first aid, very similar to what combat medics do today. The movie Hacksaw Ridge is based on a famous combat medic, Desmond Thomas Doss. Desmond was a United States Army corporal who fought in World War II in the battles of Guam, Leyte, and Okinawa. He was a young Seventh-day Adventist who refused to kill during combat. He said his only weapons were his Bible and his faith in God. Because of his strong personal beliefs, Desmond refused to kill an enemy or even carry a weapon. Later, he became a medic assigned to the 2nd Platoon, 77th Infantry Division. While serving in his platoon, he was awarded 2 bronze medals for his exceptional bravery in helping wounded soldiers under fire. In the Battle of Okinawa, Desmond Doss saved the lives of 75 men. No one before or since has equaled this record, or even come close. Desmond received many awards, including the Medal of Honor for his exceptional bravery in the Battle of Okinawa. Desmond Doss has now paved the way for not only combat medics, but for paramedics as well. The job of a paramedic is critical. First and foremost, it is vital that paramedics are able to keep calm during emergency situations. They should be able to think quickly and accurately assess each patient's medical condition to establish an appropriate course of treatment. Paramedics are responsible for responding to emergency medical calls, providing on-site aid, and transporting patients safely to hospitals. Some of the day-to-day responsibilities of a paramedic are to administer life support, first aid treatment, and other forms of pre-hospital emergency care, operate equipment such as bag valve mask, resuscitators, external defibrillators, and electrocardiograms, assess patients' injuries and quickly commence appropriate medical procedures, assess, record, and discuss patient injuries, clean and decontaminate the ambulance after transporting or treating any patients with an infectious disease, and finally communicate and coordinate with the police, fire department, and other emergency medical teams as needed. Paramedics require certain specialized equipment to assist them in providing emergency care. Despite the equipment at times being seen on TV or on the news, what the equipment is and what it is used for by the paramedics is not generally well known. The equipment can vary from basic stretchers to the complex equipment used in intensive care units and theaters. However, all the equipment is important. The ability to use certain equipment may depend on the paramedic's qualifications. The more qualified the paramedic, the more advanced kinds of equipment he or she is able to use. And that is who conducted my first aid course, a very well-qualified and experienced paramedic. During my first aid course, we started talking about seizures and how to control them. We learned to never put anything in the patient's mouth or try stop the seizure or hold the person down. In the past, people normally used to put something in the mouth of the person who was having the seizure to try and stop them from swallowing their tongue. But we were told that by putting something in their mouth, they could easily break their teeth. We were told that you should gently lay the person down on the floor and put them on their side so that their tongue falls to either side and they do not swallow it. Then try to loosen any tight clothing and remove the person's glasses, watches, etc. If the seizure goes on for over 5 minutes, an ambulance must be called. We then learnt about bandaging and the different types of bandages used on different types of cuts and burns. The bandage helps to stop bleeding if it is a cut that you are bandaging. It also protects the cut from germs to prevent it from being infected. We then bandaged the person around the head as if they had a head injury. After that, we bandaged the arm. Then we once again bandaged the arm, this time using a splint, as if the arm was broken or the bone was sticking out. After learning about different bandaging techniques, we moved on to CPR. I had been looking forward to this the most. We were going to test CPR on a first aid doll. We started off by clearing the area and then checking to see if the patient, in this case the doll, was in any danger. We then looked for a pulse. If there is no pulse, you must immediately instruct someone to call for an ambulance. You then swipe your fingers through the patient's mouth to be sure that there is no obstruction to breathing. You then tilt the head back and perform 30 chest compressions under the diaphragm, after which you give the rescue breath. Keep doing this until the person breathes or on their own or until the ambulance arrives. We were reminded that to perform CPR on a baby, you would need to use your fingers to do the compressions instead of your whole palm, because you do not want to break or injure the baby's rib cage. This is just some of the things that I learned during my practical course. Because of COVID-19, I had to complete the rest of my first aid journey with online lessons through Udemy. During the online lessons, something that I found interesting was the sport injuries, because I really enjoy playing sports. I learned a lot about spinal injuries, neck injuries, etc. All in all, I thoroughly enjoyed this project because it took me out of my comfort zone and taught me something that I can carry with me for the rest of my life. This project has changed me tremendously because it has shown me how valuable our health and safety are and how it comes before anything else. It also taught me that life happens, and you never know what might happen to you, a family member, or even a friend. They could get badly injured at any moment, and it is crucial to know what to do in those moments. I'd like to sincerely thank Mr. Bester for always being there for me and for all his help and support. I'd also like to thank the school for giving me this opportunity. Thank you. Next up is Shakira. Sorry.
Looking at the girl standing directly in front of me, staring into her ocean green blue eyes, with her brown hair flowing past her shoulders and her black skirt flowing from her hips all the way to her ankles, revealing bright orange frills bouncing up and down to the beat of the music. High above her head were her arms. Her feet were tingling with the music vibrating up through the floor. In that moment of perfect harmony, I thought just maybe it would be possible to do all of this. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, teachers and peers. My name is Shakira Kemkin, and for my grade 11 project, I chose to do Spanish dancing. The origin of the word Spanish dancing comes from the word sarabande. Sarabande comes from the Arabic word for noise. Eventually, after many years, when Spain had a national dance, the term sarabande changed to bailar de España, which directly translates to Spanish dancing. Spain for many years was under a dictator who oppressed women, arts, and the Spanish culture. But as usual, people do not always listen to what they're told to do, so women continued to dance. Women continued to dance in groups. It was the only form of self-expression and a way to express the emotions that they had. But nothing lasts forever. The oppression ended, and the arts and the culture were able to resurface. Nothing lasts forever, so the oppression ended. Once this happened, it was as if all the different dance styles and cultures were put into a mixing bowl and came out new, different, and integrated. Each province in Spain, which amounts to 47, had their own provincial dance. Once this happened, Spanish dancing made its way to the churches. Once it was involved with the churches, men started to be part of the dances. Once this happened, a popular style started to emerge, duets. And this brings us to Spanish dancing as we know it today. Currently in our time now, Spanish dancing is having the most worldwide exposure it has ever had. In Spanish dancing, there are certain tools that are essential to the dance. This includes castanets, hand fans, and heels. Castanets are two pieces of wood that are shaped like a water droplet. They are hollowed out in the center, creating the clapping sound that you hear. Traditionally, males had bigger castanets to accommodate their larger hands, resulting in the pitch being of a lower register, while women had smaller castanets, again for their hand size, resulting in a higher pitch. The castanet has a string looped through the middle. To play it, you loop your thumb through the string holes so that it hangs in the center of your palm. You then tap with your fingertips against the two pieces, knocking them together. And that is essentially how you play a castanet. You can make all types of rhythms that you wish to. Hand fans came to Spain through Italian trade. They were first accessories only to noble women. But as the summers in Spain can reach alarming temperatures, soon almost every woman and girl had one with them. With them constantly being around, they were emerged into the dances. A hand fan consists of a pivot point or head. Coming out of it are sticks. Depending on the type of fan, they can range between 20 to 40 sticks. Coming from the sticks are guards or ribs. They provide movement and support to the leaf. The leaf is often described as the most flamboyant part of a fan. But also from fans, a language started to emerge between women fans and communicating with men mainly. For instance, fanning yourself to the right on the right cheek meant yes. The left meant no. Fanning yourself fast meant you were uninterested, while fanning yourself slow meant you were seduced. Hand fans and the leaf of a hand fan were only made from the most expensive and precious materials available, consisting of silk, frills, and lace. For heels, you get 5 types, but they can be categorized into 2. For instance, you have short fat heels called Cuban heels. They also provide maximum support and comfort to a dancer. You then have a variety of slim and elegant heels used for such dances as flamenco and pasodoble. But in Spanish dancing, we mainly use short fat heels. Spanish dance shoes are embedded at the heel and at the nose of the shoe with nail ends. They are there to enhance the footwork of the dancer. With this enhanced sound, the dancer will usually follow the beat or the rhythm of the music. And this brings me to my last part, my practical. Looking for a dance studio was actually much harder than I thought it would be, as Spanish dancing is not as common as I'd hoped or thought it would be. Nevertheless, I found a dance studio called Castanets Dance Studio, just off of William Nicol Drive. When I enrolled into 2 dance lessons a week as I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could in the short amount of time that I had. One class being Spanish dancing and the other being modern. I was told it would improve my footwork and my flexibility in learning Spanish dancing faster. For modern and Spanish dancing, we would dance in heels right from the beginning. This was a big adjustment for me as I do not usually wear heels, nevertheless dance in it. So how much heels actually hurt your feet is something I experienced for the first time. And I have a new respect for women that wear them every day. When I started, I was extremely intimidated by the smallest of things, such as I was one of the oldest in the class, the youngest being 8. And when I watched them, they made Spanish dancing look so beautiful and elegant, just effortlessly. While when you looked at the mirrored wall directly in front of us, you saw all the clumsy attempts that I made at trying to do dance moves, and rather embarrassing moments. But in all of this,
there was a knight in shining armor called Sir Thames. Sir Thames was an experienced dancer who was part of the class. He helped me to learn moves and was incredibly patient to deal with what I felt was me being dyslexic all the time. And I just couldn't understand what was going wrong. Another really supportive figure was my teacher, Nadia. She would at first say to me, next time it will be better, or just take it a little slower. But closer to the end, I would watch as Nadia and Sir Thames would laugh at me in the mirror. Just this time round, I would be laughing with them. Thinking back onto it all now, I know that I would not have had the experience that I had, filled with fun and laughter, if it were not for them. During this time coming to an end, I noticed the big improvements in my dance techniques and styles. When you have such an improvement, certainly in dancing, you also feel it in the way your body moves and the ease of just being able to do a move. And that is what I thought dancing was all about. This sort of sense of achievement that I felt made it all worth it. Having completed my project, I now know that dancing is something that I want to and will continue to do. The way I see dancing is like playing an instrument. It's never too late to do it, whenever that may be, to start or just to continue playing. I would now just like to thank the school for giving us this incredible opportunity, to Ms. Fuda for always staying with us and being patient, to my mentor, Ms. Pretorius, who I'd like to say a special thank you for marking all my terrible grammar and spelling. And then most importantly, to my mom, for always supporting me in whatever I choose to do. Thank you. What is that? Next up is Rowan Holz.
The will must be stronger than the skill. Muhammad Ali. Good afternoon. My name is Rowan Holz. I chose boxing for my grade 11 project because ever since I was young, I have always been a physical person and not an elegant one. In other words, I have always been better at woodwork than handwork. My great-grandfather was an Olympic bodybuilder, and physical strength and fitness is a part of my heritage, which means it has always been a personal challenge of mine to elevate my fitness levels to the maximum. My project allowed me to do so, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, I could not complete all my fitness goals. Boxing has a very rich history, which allowed me to complete the historical component much easier than the other components. In recent years, I have become extremely interested in the world of boxing, and I have found this grade 11 project to be a great opportunity for me to take up boxing as a hobby. Some of the earliest evidence of boxing dates back to Egypt around 3000 BC. The sport was introduced to the ancient Olympic Games by the Greeks in the late 7th century BC. In ancient Greece, boxing was a well-developed sport and enjoyed consistent popularity. In Olympic terms, it was first introduced in the 23rd Olympiad, 688 BC. There were no rounds, and boxers fought until one of them accepted defeat or could not continue. Weight categories were not used, which meant heavyweights tended to dominate the sport. The style of boxing then usually featured an advanced left leg stance. This means that the left arm is semi-extended as a guard in addition to being used for striking, and the right arm is drawn back, ready to strike. Soft leather thongs were used to bind boxers' hands and forearms for protection. Back then, because there was no headwear, it was the head of the opponent which was mainly targeted. And there is little evidence to suggest that focus on the body was common. Boxing was a popular sport in ancient Rome, and eventually harder leather was used, and the thong soon became a weapon. The Romans even introduced metal studs to the thongs to make the cestus. The cestus was an ancient battle glove, which was often filled with iron plates or blades, which the Romans used as boxing gloves. The Roman form of boxing was often a fight until the death, to please the viewers who had gathered at such events. However, especially in later times, purchased slaves and trained combat performers were valuable properties. Often, slaves were used against one another in a circle marked on the floor. This is where the term ring came from. In AD 393, during the Roman gladiator period, boxing was stopped due to extreme brutality. Records of classical boxing activity disappeared after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, when the wearing of weapons became common once again and an interest in fighting with the fist. As the wearing of swords became less common, there was new interest in fencing with the fist. It was not until the late 16th century that boxing resurfaced in London. An early article on boxing was published in Nottingham, 1713, by Sir Thomas Parkins, a successful wrestler from Bunny, Nottinghamshire, who had practiced the techniques he described. The article, Cornish Hug Wrestler, described a system of headbutting, punching, eye gouging, chokes, and hard throws, not recognized in boxing today. The first boxing rules, called the Broughton's Rules, were introduced by champion Jack Broughton in 1743 to protect the fighters in the ring where deaths sometimes occurred. Under these rules, if a man went down and could not continue after a count of 30 seconds, the fight was over. Hitting a down fighter and grasping below the waist were forbidden. Most of these rules are still used in boxing today. Since then, boxing has changed its style of fighting, and in modern boxing, there are 4 basic punches, which are the jab, cross, hook, and uppercut. When a boxer is right-handed or orthodox, his left hand is the lead hand, and his right hand is his rear hand. A southpaw or left-handed boxer reverses these hand positions. Together with this is a small clockwise rotation of the torso and hips, and the fist rotates 90 degrees and becomes horizontal on impact. When the punch is at full extension, the fighter can pull up his lead shoulder to guard his chin. The cross is a powerful straight punch that is thrown with the rear hand from the chin. It crosses the body towards the opponent in a straight line. The rear shoulder is thrust forward and finishes touching the outside of the chin, while at the same time, the left hand is pulled back against the face to protect the inside of the chin. A cross punch is used to counter a jab, when the fighter aims for the opponent's head or to counter a body punch. The hook is a semicircular punch that is thrown with the lead hand to connect to the side of the opponent's head. From the guard position, the elbow is drawn back with a horizontal fist or palm facing down. The rear hand is tucked firmly against the jaw to protect the chin. The torso and hips rotate clockwise, which propels the fighter's fist through a tight clockwise arc, across the front of the body connecting with the opponent. At the same time, the lead foot turns clockwise and causes the left heel to turn outwards. The uppercut is a vertical rising punch thrown with the rear hand. The rear hand drops below the level of the opponent's chest, and the fighter's knees are slightly bent. The fighter thrusts his rear hands upwards in a rising arc to connect to the opponent's chin or torso. The uppercut is strategically used to set the opponent's body off balance. In my limited time of practical training, I was only able to complete 24 hours of work due to the pandemic. But in those 24 hours, I trained 3 days a week at Smith's boxing gym, and each session was 1 hour long. On my first day of boxing training, I did a one-on-one session. I started by skipping for 5 minutes. Then after that, Mike showed me how to do a boxing stance. For this stance, you have to keep your strong foot pivoted with your legs close together, but not crossing each other. And your hands must stay on your cheeks with your elbows attached to your rib cage. He showed me how to move in the stance. If you want to move forward, your front foot must launch you forward, and if you want to move backwards, your back foot must launch you backwards. Later in my training, I learned to get just the movement correct, which takes a long time to get used to. Once I had the movement down, I was taught how to weave. So on my 7th week of training, for my one-on-one session, my trainer made me skip for 5 minutes, then go outside to where there was a rope attached to the door on the one side and attached to the balcony on the other. He taught me how to stand on the one side of the rope, then squat and go to the other with your left foot going first. Once your body is on the left side, then your right foot, which is still pivoted, follows afterwards. This is basic weaving, and I also learned how to do that while adding jabs to whatever side I was on. I have advanced to going 2 kilometers on the treadmill for 8 minutes, and I learned how to gain more fluency and stamina, as well as speed and power to my punches. Now I can do 300 reps on the ropes and 100 sit-ups. For a cool down at the end, I do a biking session for 5 minutes with a speed of 70 RPM. I have learned that I'm actually not as fit as I thought I was, and that soccer fitness is not the same as boxing fitness. When you watch the boxers on TV, they make it look extremely easy, but this is not the case. At the same time, it is not as complex as it sounds in theory, but it does require a lot of focus and patience. I can conclude that I have still learned a lot from my very short experience, and I will try to master the sport hopefully by this time next year. I would like to thank my internal mentor, Mr. Garcia, who made my historical component even easier than I thought it was going to be, and for guiding me through this whole process. I would like to thank my external mentors, Michael Markham, Keaton Gomez, and Peter Smith, for teaching me the fundamentals of boxing. I would like to thank the school for giving me the opportunity to pursue my interest in boxing, and I, of course, would like to thank both my parents for taking me to the gym every time and for listening to me talk nonstop about my training sessions. Thank you. Next up is Pepiso Masuku.
No.
SP.
Arnold Schwarzenegger once said, "What is the point of being on this earth if you're going to be like everyone else?" Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pepiso Masugu, and I'm going to be talking about my project, bodybuilding. Let us start with, what is bodybuilding? Well, bodybuilding is the action of going to the gym to develop one's figure for aesthetic purposes. Anyone who participates in these events professionally is often considered to be a bodybuilder. In bodybuilding events, the bodybuilders line themselves up on an elevated platform to perform very specific poses that they have practiced in their spare time. There are judges at these competitions that rank the bodybuilders based on criteria such as symmetry, masculinity, size, conditioning, posing, and their stage presentation. Bodybuilders prepare for these competitions by depleting non-essential body fat, following very strict diets, dehydrating their muscles, loading their bodies with carbohydrates to achieve maximum muscular definition and vascularity. Weightlifting was developed in 1880 to 1953, where strong men displayed their features of strength for the public eye. And they would challenge each other to see who the strongest man was amongst themselves. The difference between modern day bodybuilding and olden day bodybuilding is that modern day bodybuilding focuses more on physique and their poses, whereas olden day bodybuilding focused more on their strength and not as much on their physique. Most modern day bodybuilders use anabolic steroids, and they have been using them since the 1970s. They were also legalized in competitions during this time. Steroids do have a very bad impact on your health. They only allowed the bodybuilders to take a specific dosage of steroids so that they did not cause as much damage as they already do. The long-term effects for anabolic steroids are reduced sperm count, damage to your heart, development of breasts, and the size of your testicles shrinking. There are many more effects on this list, but I honestly don't think you guys would like to hear the rest of all of that. There were not many natural bodybuilders during the 1970s and the 1980s because every guy had a huge ego and wanted to be the biggest guy in the room, and sadly that came at a cost. Mr. Olympia is the most prestigious bodybuilding event where people like Ronnie Coleman, Lee Haney, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and many more participated. Something that all these bodybuilders had in common is that unfortunately, they all took steroids. Ronnie Coleman was my inspiration throughout my whole project because he is the best bodybuilder of all time, and he was a man that was looked down upon by many people because of his skin color. I felt like I wanted to train the way that he did. He never missed a day of training and made the most out of each session at the gym. I don't admire the fact that he used steroids, but I admired his work ethic. I learned that a normal person can go to the gym and work out for 30 days straight, but don't see any growth. It's all because of your diet and the supplements you might be taking at the time. This project taught me to have self-discipline and patience with my body, because without those two main points, I would have not continued to do my project during lockdown, because I never saw any results when I was doing my project at home. When a few months went by, I started to see how my body started to gain muscle I started to see how my body started to gain the muscle that I was looking for in the first month. I enjoyed the feeling of being healthy and actually having energy in the past 6 months. I had a healthy diet, slept 8 hours every night. Life was good. I couldn't complain. I'm definitely going to follow some of the healthy tips that I learned from this project because I do like the way it made me feel. I had originally planned to go to the gym 5 days a week, but then the coronavirus had other plans. I would have shown all of you the progress I had made from the beginning of the year until now if I had actually gone to the gym. But I don't think there's a reason for that now because during lockdown, I mainly focused on maintaining the physique I had from the beginning of the year. I did not actually realize all the obstacles that a bodybuilder has to go through before he or she goes and decides that they want to become a bodybuilder. You need to be in a really good mental space in your life before you go and show your body off to the world. Because insecurities can get the best of you and you could end up forgetting all your practice poses. It can be very exhausting having to wake up early hours of the morning, 6 days a week, to have to go train when your body is aching and it feels though you could collapse and fall to your knees. It is very rewarding when you get to the part of training your body where all of this feels like second nature to you. It takes an extreme amount of physical strength to engage in the weight and cardio training and the pain of your trainer telling you to do more reps and more sets of weights. During this project, I found that it was very difficult to eat the amount of food I was going to eat every day. I'd be eating 6 meals that contained a balanced amount of protein, carbs, and fat. Sadly, I did not get the opportunity to finish the practical because I had fractured my wrist during this time. And once again, the coronavirus had another hurdle for me to attempt to jump over. During my project, I had to overcome many obstacles in order to be mentally and physically healthy. I admit I did have my cheat days every once in 2 weeks, but I did stay disciplined in terms of me eating healthy and doing anything that I could to make sure that I did not become overweight during lockdown. I had managed to control the amount of food I was eating, and I made sure that it was less than what I was consuming before lockdown. I had to be cautious that I did not come out of this project looking like I had just been eating instead of actually putting in the work. It was tough to do a lot of the body weight exercises, but I did get through it in the end, and that is all that matters right now. I'd like to give a special thanks to my internal mentor, Mrs. Jordan, and my external mentor, Spoo. And I'd like to thank my parents for supporting my decision to do this project. Thank you very much. Next up is Connor Roosevelt.
The deep sea is the largest museum on Earth. It contains more history than all the museums on land combined, and yet we're only now penetrating it. Robert Ballard. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Connor Roosevelt, and I did my grade 11 project on scuba diving. After many hours of being on the internet, I have witnessed my fair share of underwater discoveries made by people. From old shipwrecks and treasures to guns and jewelry, I was fascinated by how these divers were able to navigate the underwater worlds. Humans have always had a desire to explore the oceans beneath the waves for centuries. Diving dates back to over 500 BC, when Greek soldiers made use of hollow tubes during battles to breathe underwater. It is even reported by the Greek philosopher Aristotle that Alexander the Great hid during the siege of Tyre in an old barrel that was used as a primitive diving bell. Diving bells were chambers that transported divers down to the darkest depths of the oceans. The pressure of the water outside the chamber kept the air inside, meaning that divers had a constant supply of air without having to regularly return to the surface. This discovery allowed for people to dive to greater depths than before and for longer periods of time. These bells were used for hunting and exploring sunken shipwrecks and treasures. Leonardo da Vinci even took his own dip into the world of scuba diving, drafting suits for swimmers to wear that would closely resemble suits that would not be seen for hundreds of years. Due to the limitations of the diving bell, equipment became increasingly advanced as the years went on. Later in Europe, unsophisticated diving suits were developed with air pumps that would pump life-saving air to the diver below the water surface. Over the next 2 centuries, these would slowly develop into brass helmets and rubber suits. The standard Navy diving suits at the time would consist of 8 separate items, each one to give maximum protection to the diver, but namely the rubber suit and the iconic brass helmet. These suits were slowly advanced from the 1800s until the World Wars at the turn of the century, when they were used for underwater salvage and repairs on Navy ships. Enter Jacques Rousseau, who is known as the father of scuba diving. Among his many talents, he was a filmmaker, producer, writer, explorer, and photographer, but most importantly, in my opinion, he developed modern-day scuba diving. He and engineer Emile Gagnan helped to develop the rebreather unit, which revolutionized scuba diving, and in 1943, they developed the aqualung. To do so, they attached a new demand valve system to a pair of twin hoses and a mouthpiece, which in turn attaches to a pair of twin cylinders. In 1952, Gagnan patented a modification to this apparatus, this time coining the legendary name SCUBA. SCUBA is an acronym for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus. This simpler and more affordable scuba unit unearthed a previously largely undiscovered underwater world for people to discover. These designs have slowly developed over the years, mainly to make life while underwater easier, such as the buoyancy control device, submersible pressure gauges, single hose regulators, and even dive computers. In diving, there's a lot of equipment and gear that one must consider before embarking on a dive, starting from the very material that makes your scuba experience more enjoyable, such as making use of a dry suit or wetsuit. While these are not a necessity, they do make your life easier. However, some pieces of equipment are necessarily every time you enter the water, like scuba tank, regulator, and of course, deployable life jacket. Scuba diving is primarily about extending the amount of time that one can be underwater by allowing it to breathe while still being able to examine the underwater world. The inventors and innovators of scuba diving have done this by continually modernizing and working on new and improved ways to make us able to extend the time we can be submerged. The human eyes are not precisely designed for underwater use. This creates the need for masks or goggles while diving. A diving mask or scuba mask is an item of equipment that allows underwater divers, including scuba divers, freedivers, and snorkelers, to clearly see underwater. By providing an airspace in front of the eyes, the eye can focus nearly perfectly to see the beauty which often lies beneath the water surface. The scuba tank diving cylinder, or diving tank, is a gas cylinder that can store and transport high-pressure breathing gas that is required by a scuba diver. Manufacturers use aluminum or steel alloys to produce these cylinders. Attached to the cylinder is a diving regulator. A diving regulator is a pressure regulator that controls the pressure of the breathing gas. The gas that can be provided may be regular air that is filtered into the regulator, or a mix of special breathing gases that are mixed up for specific dives. This gas is then supplied either by a diving cylinder that is carried by the diver or by high-pressure storage tanks on the surface in the case of surface-supplied diving. There are 2 registered full swimsuits that a diver can wear during a dive if they feel the need to do so. They can either wear the aforementioned dry suit or wetsuit. These classifications are based on how they keep the wearer shielded from the underwater elements. A dry suit provides the diver with environmental protection by way of exclusion of water, whereas wetsuits allow for a thin layer of water to enter the suit between the skin and the fabric. The wetsuit is more commonly used by athletes in other water sports and activities to avoid the high thermal insulation which accompanies a dry suit. As I'm sure many of you can imagine, most of us were not able to complete the practical aspects of our projects. Although I can say I decided to give it a try by jumping into the pool in the middle of winter. And I will be the first to tell you that I'll never ever do that again in my entire life. Of course, once I decided on that action, my mentor and I both settled on the idea of doing online courses. After I finished my online courses, I did spend many hours of my quarantine life sitting on my bed watching videos on the internet of scuba divers finding interesting artifacts, but mainly weapons, in sketchy lakes on the outskirts of trashy American towns and cities. While finding weapons and dead bodies would have been my ideal practical, I did indeed learn a lot about the history of scuba diving and how it is used today, and the many weird corners of YouTube. I hope one day in the future, however far away it may be, I can complete a scuba dive, take a selfie with a shark, and find my long-desired weapon. Although my practical did not go the way I thought and hoped, it still presented me with new challenges. I would like to thank my mentor, Mrs. Robenheimer, for helping me along, and the school for letting me do this project, and my parents for paying for the online course. Thank you. Up next is Ati.
I do not always know what I want, but I do know what I don't want. Stanley Kubrick. Good afternoon, parents, teachers, and fellow classmates. My name is Adi Reed. Those words I just stated perfectly describe my experience with my project. What is my project? My project is film study, more specifically cinematography and editing. I chose this topic to really dive into the life of a cinematographer and editor. I want to see the rewards and challenges that will come from both sides. And without a doubt, I definitely felt the difficulty of both, with COVID only making it a tad bit harder. Ever since I started high school, I grew to find an interest in the arts. As a child, I always had an extremely active imagination, often creating my own world and having my own crazy little adventures. Art allowed me to express what I was feeling and bring my imagination to life. So I thought for my project, I should explore a section of art that I never really explored before. So overall, I decided to go with film. Film in itself is quite a vast subject, so I narrowed it down to editing and cinematography. Starting with the history of film, which surprisingly started all by accident. It started with inventors and artists trying out new technology to try and see the world from a whole new perspective. At the very beginning, film started out as a collection of still images moving in a rapid succession, creating the illusion of motion. In a way, it was almost like a magic trick. As the years passed by, people started to invent more sophisticated devices to create the same illusion of motion. Eventually, photography came along. In the 1820s, a French inventor was the first person to take a camera photograph. There were still problems with the photograph, as they were still fragile and they weren't easy to replicate. Plus, the chemicals they used were still very toxic. Still, these innovations eventually led up to Thomas Edison and W.K.L. Dixon to invent the kintograph, the world's first motion picture camera. This paved the way for many filmmakers to experiment with motion pictures. Thanks to the continuous growth of technology, we got introduced to animated features and the films we know today. With my theoretical side of things, I discovered that editors have many unique different styles of editing. Of course, the editing style has to match the style of the film that they're filming. Still, the editors also add their own unique touches to some films. Some even advise the directors and cut some parts out of the film. Like filmmakers, editors spend a lot of time mastering their skill. Technology is also an important part in the editing process. Both editors and assistant editors must have strong computer skills. With editing also comes with you being in front of a computer for most of your day and spending long hours trying to get it right. This is a career that requires you to be in solitude so you can focus on your work. That wasn't too hard for me because naturally I'm an introvert at heart. But interpersonal skills are also important for an editor. A cinematographer's job is much more of an interactive job. With an editor, you for the most part sit on a computer all day. With a cinematographer, sometimes it requires you to stay up very late at night or wake up very early in the morning to get the right shot. They normally get to the set before the director to make sure everything's in place. So you gather the lighting crew and the lighting design team to review the set for the day. Sometimes there'll be quite a few things that need rearranging or need to be changed. Some days the weather must be a specific condition for them to do the shoot, or a very rare natural phenomenon must happen and they only get one shot to do the shoot and it has to be perfect. A cinematographer also has to check in with the camera crew to make sure that the camera lenses are all good to go. A cinematographer also has to practice alongside with the camera crew the movements of the camera so it's perfect for the scene they're shooting. As for my practical, one of the first things I had to do was find an external mentor, which wasn't too difficult to do. But because of COVID-19, it made it near impossible for me to see her. So that left me to mainly self-study and do my practical on my own. For the start of my practical, I started by downloading a bunch of editing apps and playing around with them. One of the best things I learned about editing is that just playing around with the apps with no specific instruction or method is one of the best ways to learn. Then eventually I was given a few more apps I should download on my computer, as they were more advanced than the ones on my phone. But I rarely use a computer at all, other than for Word and for PowerPoint, so they're extremely difficult for me to learn. The first thing I practiced on was cutting parts or adding parts into a video. I would take random video clips and watch them, then decide what stays and what goes. Whether shorter or longer, it always had to make sense and deliver the message it was intended to deliver. During this time, I learned about many different types of cuts. This includes standard shots, jump cuts, J-cut, L-cut, montage, and cutting on action. I also learned about audio editing and sound design. Sound is something that gives a video more life depending on the type of video you're trying to shoot. While editing, I'll sometimes add my own sounds. These can be quick sound effects, a musical instrument playing softly in the background, or a full song, or at least parts of a song. Or let's try and make sure that the sound makes sense in the context of the video. With cinematography, I unfortunately didn't get to work on it as much as I did with editing. I had very limited things to film as I was restricted to my house and my garden. One of the things I needed to learn about cinematography was the different types of shots. I tried one way or another to do them all. There was a lot to unpack when it comes to unpacking it. There's also frames to look at, which includes single shots, which goes up to 5 shots, More than that, it's called a crowd shot, point of view, and insert shot. A few challenges I faced was getting space to do what I actually wanted to do. I wanted to shoot videos away from home, but because of lockdown, that made it near impossible for me to do. I also struggled using a computer for my edits as I rarely use it at all. The controls were a bit confusing. Eventually, I did figure it out, but it would take me a lot of time to cut or to add sound effects to specific clips. I started to use my iPad instead, as I thought it was easier for me to understand, and I could use multiple apps at once. With a computer, I had to focus on the one app I was using. Combining those skills, I could make a complete video. It was still fun though. I wouldn't say learning it was easy, but I also wouldn't say it was hard. Once you get a hang of the mechanics, it becomes less of a struggle to finish your clip. One example I'd like to show you is what you can achieve by doing editing at home with no added resources. Here, as you can see, I did nothing special. I just played around with some filters and messed around with the motion. Coronavirus both ruined and helped my plans at the same time. Ruined my plans for my project, but it gave me some time to work on things that I actually wanted to do, this being one of them. This is definitely something I would love to continue with in the future, and hopefully one day make a full, complete video. Special thanks to Ms. Titus for guiding me through the process and for handling my procrastination, as well as my mother for helping me through the process and giving me moral support. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Quince next.
I've always had an on and off relationship with art. It's been rather fraught. I'm not naturally talented, and as someone who gets bored rather easily, this doesn't bode well. I'm used to things coming easily to me, and when that doesn't happen, I more often than not give up. Art was almost the exception to that rule. I enjoyed art despite not being very good at it, but I didn't push myself at it. I did not work hard at improving because that required actual effort and a lot of failure, something which the brain in general doesn't enjoy. The fact that I stuck with art as long as I have is nothing short of a miracle. When this project came around, I realized that this was my opportunity to push myself past my petty frustrations and actually improve. Often, I found myself only working hard at things I found difficult when there was academic achievement on the line. In the end, this proved no different. Good afternoon, parents, teachers, and fellow students. The project topic I chose was digital art with a focus on character design. Because that's quite the mouthful, I shortened it to capturing a character. I love Pixar and by extension, Disney. The idea of conveying a character through art alone was a skill that enticed me, and Pixar is the best at it. Character design felt like a natural integration into the project and gave me something to focus on beyond the rather broad title of digital art. I want to share my journey, both my internal dialogue during this period and my external experience with the requirements of the project. I began the practical aspect of my project in mid-January, and by the end of February, I had completed my hours. This may sound impressive, but was honestly me just making my life harder because of my stubbornness. I had somehow managed to convince myself that looking up at tutorials for the program I was using, Procreate, was cheating. And I had, told myself that I had to figure out how to do everything on my own. When I look back to my old artworks from that period, I realized what had once taken me 3 hours to complete would now take me 30 minutes. By March, I had learned my lesson and looked up some online tutorials, but now I had another mountain to face. My historical should not have been as hard for me to write as it was, but research has never been my strong suit. Nonetheless, I persevered, and the things that I learned in the process of writing my historical were illuminating. Character design has always been an integral part to storytelling, but it really became necessary in the late 19th century with the advent of cartoons. It was important to have simple and recognizable characters. During this rise in popularity of cartoons, World War I was being fought, and cartoonists were quick to express their political views through their characters. Even after the war ended, politics were now a common integration into cartoons, the most notable of these being Little Orphan Annie. The writer of Annie, Harold Gray, used his character to express his ire with the American government. Then the Second World War arrived, and along with it, the creation of two of the most popular superheroes today. I've always had an avid love of superheroes, but these two I just never liked. They were Captain America and Superman. I thought that they had no shades of gray, and they were too powerful. They were unfailingly good, and despite never really being challenged in a fight, they were constantly presented as the underdogs. This seems like a random nerd fuel tirade, but I swear this is going somewhere. Both of these characters were created within 3 years of each other. They were meant to be morale boosters during the war. The artists didn't want to challenge them because that might be disheartening, and they had no shades of gray because the last thing you want to do in war is have your own side question what you were doing. Later, there could be other heroes, like Iron Man and Batman, that could make mistakes, that could be human. This is probably where I first started learning about what I like in characters. I'd always liked certain fictional people, but now I had to question why. I liked characters that were flawed, but undoubtedly good. Characters that were too bad or too good or too boring. They tended to be predictable and self-righteous. So naturally, because I drew my first character, Amelie, before I explored what I liked in a character, she was boring. I tried giving her a personality after the fact, but nothing stuck. She was simply a teenager with purple hair and nothing else going for her. My historical made me a better researcher, but by the time I needed to write my theoretical, I was facing a different challenge. I'm a storyteller. I like the information I give to have a coherent through line and leave you with a narrative. But this is not what a theoretical is meant to be. I had to go against my instincts to make it a story and instead just tell the facts. It was also probably my biggest period of learning how to have a person look at a character and have an immediate reaction. This probably sounds obvious when I say it, but color tells the viewer what to feel. Same with shapes. Sharp, cool-toned characters are less approachable and friendly. It's why the evil queen in Snow White is all sharp limbs and cool-toned colors. And the rounder and warmer-toned your character is, the more palatable they are, especially to children. Making a character square and using bold colors like red and gold create ideas of heroism. All of this sounds like common sense, but in an animated movie, animators can cheat by not having you actually like a character, but simply like the way that they look. And more often than not, we let it happen, too focused on the story to realize. Pixar likes to flip this on its head, a lot. In Toy Story 3, the main villain is a soft, fuzzy purple bear named Lotso. In Up, the villain is Charles F. Muntz, and his design is primarily comprised of squares. And in the first Toy Story, Woody has a bunch of sharp angles because the writers wanted you to get to know the character before you liked him. It's what makes him a good character. Good character design is not simply utilizing color and shape theory, but also challenging it. Making the message of your character conveyed, but not so obviously that the viewer is aware of the manipulation. I've already told you about Amelie, my first character, but I have one other character that I like drawing regularly. Her name is Tempest, and she's a storm demon. She has 3 major forms, based on the major moods: sadness, happiness, and anger. Happiness is my favorite version of her, because she's all soft, fluffy cloud hair and pastel colors. With anger, I primarily used red tones and dark storm gray hair. Sadness is probably the least subtle use of color and design, with puddle hair and blue-gray tones. She had an inbuilt personality, unlike Amelie, and personally, I think she's more interesting for it. I had viewed art as purely aesthetic up until this point, but then in May, the brutal murder of George Floyd occurred, and I began to see art as a potential form of activism. There was global outcry, and protests raged for over a month. I needed a way to express my horror and frustration. We were looking at systems that had been broken and ignored for so long. Floyd's murder was awful, but we had been seeing the effects of systemic racism for decades, and things like this had happened before. People would be mad for a couple of months, and then social media would move on when people were no longer interacting with the outrage. I needed a way to keep myself accountable and aware. Like the cartoonists of the 20th century, I decided to turn to art to express my feelings. I started a series called Last Words, where I memorialized the victims of a racist system, along with the last words they ever heard or spoke. My goal was to not forget and to not forgive. I could not allow myself to be comforted by my privilege and once again become complacent and complicit in a racist system. Every time I drew another person, my heart broke all over again. But that's exactly what needed to happen. We distance ourselves from our own emotions and from the tragedies around us, and it's what allows it to happen again. I was exploring one of the many avenues of art as an expression of emotion and of political beliefs. It was cathartic, and each piece took several hours to complete. I could come to terms with my heartbreak and anger instead of shoving it away. Because I was drawing real people, I had to make them recognizable, and this was a time of growth and improvement. May marks the beginning of an extreme period of creativity for me. I was constantly creating, and had begun to carry a sketchbook around with me. This is also where the idea of becoming an artist after school was solidified for me. I'd casually considered it before, but never as a career. I viewed the idea as on par with becoming a famous singer or a member of the royal family. It was fun, but just a dream. But as art became a regular part of my life, I was more and more aware of how happy it made me. I could not imagine life without art after school, and suddenly I was not only working towards the end of this project, but also towards art school. Between May and July, I had improved considerably, and faces were no longer the challenge they once were. Then came August. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I was facing a startling lack of motivation. This had happened before. Motivation doesn't last forever, but never with this level of nothing. There was no drive, and to make matters worse, whenever I did create something, I hated it. This carried on until the end of August. I was frustrated and at my wit's end, and wondering if I had somehow broken something. I then remembered something my mentor, Mr. Art, had said to me. I don't think he meant it in this context. He had been saying it in reference on how to improve when I had asked him. But he said that I needed to zoom in. I needed to master drawing one piece of what I wanted to draw at a time, like an eye or a nose. It was then I realized what had happened. I was so big picture focused that I had stopped seeing what I did like in a drawing and had let the parts that I struggled with dominate my opinion of it. What I needed to do was to zoom in, to find the parts that I struggled with, but also to not let that become my entire view. Slowly, I started sketching again. It was nothing like it was back in May or even July. It was hard work again, It was something that I had to sit down and decide to do, but I needed to do it. Because even if my relationship with art was off, I still loved it. It still made me happy. Little by little, it got easier to pick up a pencil and just draw. My relationship to art is still not what it was in July, but August showed me that I can work through another slump if it happens and hopefully learn something along the way. I want to thank my parents, who are incredibly supportive and open to hearing me complain when things weren't going well and to look at my work when things were. And especially to my mom, who had to listen to this speech way too many times. I want to thank my mentor, Mr. Art, who gave me some great advice and who pushed me to pursue art past what I thought possible for myself. And finally, I want to thank my guardian, Mrs. Footer, who was so helpful at the beginning of this experience when everything was new and scary, and later when Corona was really doing the most. She was right there to make sure we kept on top of things and never missed a deadline. I never had a finite goal for the end of my project. Art is so subjective that I didn't know where I was going to end up on this journey. I still can't believe this project is over. Whenever I heard one of the previous grade 11s gush about how much this project taught them and made them consider new and different career options, I would think, it cannot be that life-changing. But now that I'm here at the end, I can fairly confidently say that at least for me, it was. Thank you. I would like to welcome to the podium Heather Mitchell-Moore.
Red lipstick is confidence directly to your face. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Heather Mitchell-Moore, and today I'm about to speak about makeup artistry as a whole. The art of wearing makeup was invented approximately 12,000 years ago by the ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians really loved their makeup, as you can see from their piece of Egyptian history. As time moved on, the Middle Ages, people began to experiment more and more with makeup and its application. The lead-based makeup was discovered to be harmful to people who wore it. Some started using the belladonna plant, which was also known as a nightshade, to cover up pigmentation. This plant is dangerous, and soon they stopped using it. Many cosmetic materials are still popular today, such as henna. Men and women all over the world decorated their eyes with colored henna. Usually, they used the colors dark green, black, or blue. The makeup artistry industry is magnificent. It adds color to the world. One of the most important lessons one needs to learn when becoming a makeup artist is to learn about makeup theory. Makeup theory teaches you to ensure that your makeup applications work with your client's skin to produce a flawless finished product. Thousands of companies all over the world supply needs such as brushes, sponges, stencils, and makeup. Using the right equipment is essential to create your masterpiece. To create your perfect look, you will need primer, foundation, concealer, contour, blush, highlighter, eyebrow pencil, eyeshadow, and lipstick. Most people prefer to go for a more natural look for day-to-day makeup, but I do prefer a glowing look for the nights that we will definitely remember in the future. When applying makeup, you should have a minimum of 8 to 10 clean brushes in a set. This may sound like a lot, but it means you will conclude with a clean, glamorous piece of art. The second part of my theory is a color theory. Color theory is one of the practical foundations of everything that a makeup artist does. Makeup artists need to be able to provide a good corrective camouflage makeup, enhance or complement natural coloring, blend in prosthetic pieces, and create realistic casualty effects. Color theory in makeup is used to obtain colors needed and to create effects which trick the eye. By really knowing your color theory, you'll be able to do many things. Knowing how to achieve a practical color and understanding the colors cancel each other out are essential in makeup artistry and hairdressing. For example, a reddish pigment to the skin could be canceled out to match the rest of the face with a green-colored corrector slide. The color wheel is a simple way to look at the basic relationship between the 12 colors shown on the color wheel. It explains how to mix colors to create new ones. A day in the life of a makeup artist. Like any other job, you will need to wake up and get ready for the day at some ungodly hour. You may not have clients that early in the morning, but it will allow you to prep for the session. Preparation is key to success. Enhance that you stock up on all products, as you don't know what you may need throughout the day. Foundation and eyeshadow are most important. Business may be inconsistent during the year, which will give you time to build your client base by promoting your services. Internally, your business may only consist of 3 to 4 clients a day, but this will build up to 7 to 8 clients a day as you develop your brand. There is a high demand for this service when schools have matric dances, annual plays, and young couples are getting married in the spring. Makeup for a bride and her bridesmaid is a common job for makeup artists and can be very demanding and difficult as people have limited time and the stresses of day create tension. Makeup artists get paid accordingly to the number of clients they assist on a monthly basis. It is possible to get a contract with a company that needs this type of service on a regular basis. Once you've finished up with the clients, it is essential to clean up and wash all makeup brushes and products for health reasons, as well to extend the longevity of the product. I started my journey off with makeup artistry by undertaking a general course, then enrolled in an online course through a well-known company called Udemy. The general makeup course explained a lot about the subject. It was divided into sections which started by identifying what products are essential to have in a makeup kit, and moved on to descriptions of how to apply the makeup to one's facial features. Each section of the course ranged between 10 minutes to 1 hour in length. Overall, the general makeup artistry course was 34 hours long. Even though the course contained elements that I was familiar with, it filled in gaps that we often know we think, but are paled out when we watch experts perform their magic. As soon as I completed this course, I got started on the next one. My next challenge was a course called Special Effects Makeup Artistry in Detail. This course taught me how to transform everyday makeup products into a character. An example of this would be an alien. This course was also offered through Udemy. This course required 30 hours of practical work. Although the hours were long, my interest in the subject pushed me to move forward. Once I had completed all the courses, I decided that I wanted to create my own characters and test my new skills. The looks that I created were a warm tone, a natural, lights in the city, which was my first special effects, and an alien, which was my second. The warm toned look was my first makeup effect for the makeup artistry project. This look consisted of colorful toned eyelid where colors were created from orange, pink, purple, and yellow tones. The rest of the face appeared natural, which captured an everyday look. I used foundation, contour, and concealer for the rest of the face. I finished the look off with a brown matte lipstick. This gorgeous look took me about 1 hour to complete. The natural look was my second task. The natural look is created by showing a brown-toned eyelid with a natural sparkle to the inner corner of the eye. I use sparkle as it brings out the color of one's eye. The rest of the face needed to display a natural everyday look, which consisted of foundation, contour, and concealer. I finished the look off with a red lipstick to match the eyelid. This beautiful look took me 40 minutes to perfect. Not that long. The Lights in the City was my first special effects makeup artistry creation. Let me tell you, this is far more difficult than it looks, especially because it was my first attempt. It always looks so easy when you are watching a professional, but the color needs to be perfect. Special effects makeup needs to be straight and is often duplicated on the second half of your face, which means that there is little space for error. This look gives you a light effect on the eyelid and bigger lights down to the cheekbones and all the way to the inner corner of the mouth. This look took me about 2 hours and 30 minutes to complete. I was thrilled with the amazing result. And for my final piece, I did an alien. The Alienate look was the second special effect makeup artistry that I attempted. This look covered half the face, creating an alien illusion out of the inner facial skin. I used many colors such as green, black, and white to create this alien face. It is important to blend the colors well to ensure how smooth and professionally finished product. I finished the look off with a red tone liquid lip makeup product around the image of the alien to create a bloody effect. Patience and time is required for this look to ensure it looks natural. Well, not so natural. It is also important to have a steady hand. If colors are blended incorrectly, it could result in you having to start all over again. This look took me about 3 hours to complete. This whole experience of mine has really made me a better makeup artist and a better person. Throughout the 9 months, I was stressed, but also had so much fun. I can say that I truly have inspired myself to go further in the makeup artistry industry and will likely pursue it in my future as a lifestyle. I'd like to thank my parents, Craig and Karen Mitchell-Moore, for helping me through this project, and my internal mentor, Connie Foster, as well as my guardian, Mandy Footer, for getting me through it. Thank you.
That concludes our speeches for the afternoon. I hope you enjoyed it. Drive safely, everybody. Well done, guys. Shakira, you blew me away. Well done.